I knew things were sliding off course the moment our biggest legacy client, Tanner and Bell, asked if the woman with the calm voice was still with them. That was me. The woman. The voice. Not Caroline. Not Miss Grayson. Not even a proper title. Just the calm voice. For 7 years, I'd quietly kept their chaos from spilling into lawsuits and lost contracts. And now, I was reduced to a ghost in their inbox. Meridian Analytics didn't stay afloat because of fancy dashboards or Ethan's ridiculous slide decks. It stayed alive because I made sure the fires never started in the first place. My work wasn't glamorous. No applause at town halls, no promotions with company-branded vests. Just long hours, quiet precision, and relationships that had weathered acquisitions, scandals, and even one client founder's meltdown that ended with him buying an alpaca ranch in Colorado. At the office, they called me the human firewall. Not exactly flattering, but not wrong either. It meant I kept disasters from happening, which, ironically, meant no one ever saw me work. My systems ran so smoothly that people assumed problems simply solved themselves, and I let them believe it. Until they didn't. Every morning, I arrived 15 minutes early and left 20 minutes late, the way my father, a Navy mechanic, taught me. I drank the same coffee blend for 6 years, remembered every admin's birthday, and could recite the chief revenue officer's travel schedule from memory. I'd trained 3 entire teams without ever being officially listed as their manager. And when someone in leadership needed something fixed quietly, I'd get a Slack ping that started with, "Hey, quick question," which really meant, "Caroline, please save my career again." I didn't mind. There's freedom in invisibility. No politics, no ego, just order. I built compliance maps and risk mitigation frameworks like crossword puzzles. I even customized outreach flows based on psychological patterns, something I learned from a behavioral science elective back in college. No one asked how I did it. They just liked that it worked. My work was invisible perfection until Ethan Carlisle arrived. He appeared one Tuesday, all confidence and cologne, with hair too perfect and loafers too loud, like a man who still thought LinkedIn posts were a personality. Within a week, he was calling departments cost sinks and talking about leaner optics. I knew he'd target me eventually. Ghosts don't look good on spreadsheets. Before the storm comes stillness, though. It starts quietly. Meetings you're no longer invited to. Emails where you're copied instead of addressed. Calendar invites that vanish overnight. That's how decline begins. Not with drama, but erasure. I had built Meridian's entire client retention framework. 20% of the accounts, but 60% of the profit margin. Every dashboard Ethan bragged about in board meetings, mine. Every continuity protocol that got them through reorganizations without losing clients, mine. Every escalation flow that prevented panic calls from turning into terminations, mine. But ghosts don't ask for credit. They write contracts. When I joined Meridian as a contractor 7 years ago, I brought my own paperwork. Tucked inside, beneath the generic boilerplate language no one ever reads, was something very small, very quiet, very sharp. Clause 7.4d. We'll get to that later. Ethan Carlisle, MBA, ex-consultant and self-proclaimed turnaround specialist, arrived with the smugness of a man who thought culture could be fixed with hashtags. His first act as VP of Client Operations was to gut the legacy escalation system, the one I designed. Too manual, he said, not agile enough. I sat in that meeting across from him as he clicked through a 10-slide deck full of emojis and buzzwords, claiming our clients craved speed, not stability. He had never handled a compliance audit during a client's divorce, never sat through a midnight call with a panicked CFO. But that didn't stop him. Slide 7 had a title in Comic Sans, Caroline's Current Mess. He waved toward me like I was an outdated printer. "We're sunsetting these cost sinkholes," he announced. "Her role? Replaceable." The room froze. My throat went dry, but I said nothing. I gave him the same closed-lip smile I'd used on auditors, lawyers, and one CEO's mistress who once demanded I delete bad PR from the cloud. Ethan didn't realize he'd just stepped on a landmine, because the thing about ghosts is, they never haunt without preparation. It happened on a Friday, because of course it did. Corporate executions always do. HR likes Fridays. It gives the weekend time to absorb the shock before Monday's LinkedIn posts about new beginnings. The invite hit my inbox that morning. All hands, strategic vision update. 11 a.m., sharp. Mandatory. Third floor conference room, the same one that still smelled faintly of syrup from the waffle bar they'd catered for admin day 2 years ago. Ethan stood at the front like a man rehearsing for a TED Talk no one asked to attend. His shirt was unbuttoned just enough to show off a tan he'd definitely paid for. Hair slicked to corporate perfection, a wireless clicker clutched like it was a lightsaber. He started with his favorite words: agility, scalability, modernization. Then came the anesthesia. We've identified areas where resource optimization will align with our growth curve. Translation: someone's about to get fired. And there it was. Slide 4. My name, Caroline Grayson, tucked neatly under a bullet point labeled Operational Streamlining. Phase 1. No warning, no private talk. Just my job reduced to 12-point font in a PowerPoint about efficiency. Ethan smiled with the fake warmth of a dentist about to drill without Novocaine. We deeply appreciate Caroline's years of service, he said smoothly. Her contributions have been invaluable, but as we pivot toward a more agile model, certain legacy functions no longer align with our forward trajectory. Forward trajectory. He made it sound like we were launching rockets, not gutting human beings. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I simply nodded, stood, and walked out before he could finish the sentence. That was my rebellion, stealing his moment. No scene, no staplers, no tears, just silence. Back at my desk, I packed methodically. Every drawer was a ritual: Post-it notes, backup drives, a cracked coffee mug from a long-retired coworker, a half-dead succulent from the accounting department's divorce party. I left behind the company fleece and the mouse pad with the peeling logo. No goodbyes. The people who mattered already had my number. The rest would remember me in 2 weeks when something broke and no one could find the process doc. Before leaving, I made one final stop. Second floor, legal. I dropped a manila folder on the assistant's desk. Caroline, did you need to schedule a meeting? She asked. No, I said, just delivering something. Inside, a single-page document titled End of Engagement Notice, Clause 7.4d. Dated, signed, time-stamped. No drama, just precision. That clause, quietly inserted when I renegotiated my consulting contract 4 years ago, wasn't revenge. It was foresight, a silk-wrapped bear trap. Clause 7.4d stated that upon termination not for cause, all operational licenses and proprietary process rights reverted to the license holder. My LLC, Grayson Systems Consulting. In plain English, the moment Meridian fired me, they lost legal permission to use the very systems they were still running on. The retention flows, the escalation trees, the CRM macros, the compliance triggers, all of it. They fired me at 11:08 a.m. By 11:12, they were already in breach, and they didn't even know it yet. I walked out of Meridian with my purse on one shoulder and 7 years of quiet leverage in a folder. No one stopped me. No one applauded. The air felt heavier, like the building itself realized something vital had just left. Still waters, they say, run deep. They never mention the undertow. Week 1, the cracks didn't look like cracks. A delayed report here. A client email marked urgent sitting unread for 16 hours because no one knew that tag meant high-risk escalation. A compliance alert that went to an empty inbox. Ethan brushed it off at stand-up. We're getting leaner, more responsive, he said. He said it twice. That's how you know it's a lie. He even launched a new Slack channel, #client champions with a trophy emoji. Interns were added, directors weren't. The first to go silent was Tanner and Bell, the client who once emailed daily. Silence from them wasn't calm. It was cardiac arrest. Ethan shrugged. "They're consolidating vendors," he said. They weren't. They were waiting, watching the cracks widen. By week 2, silence had turned into smoke. You couldn't see the flames yet, but you could smell them. Tanner and Bell stopped replying to emails completely. The client that once flooded our inbox with nitpicky questions had gone dark. In corporate terms, that's a flatline, Ethan told the exec team. They're probably just renegotiating pricing. The CFO frowned but said nothing. She'd already started to sense the air shift. Then Account B, a mid-tier compliance firm worth $8 million a year, sent in a formal complaint. Not an email, not a call, a letter. Escalation mismatch, they called it, which is polite legal code for, "Your people don't know what the hell they're doing." Turns out, Ethan had reassigned a freshly graduated intern, someone who still had her GPA in her email signature, to manage a third-party audit handoff. She sent the wrong documentation twice. The client flagged it. Ethan laughed it off. "We'll comp their license fee and send a fruit basket, to a compliance firm during audit season." That was his fix. Then came Account C, the real detonator. They sent a registered letter, paper, legal phrasing, terrifying spacing, asking whether Meridian was still in compliance with Section 6.3 of their continuity contract. Translation: Did you just void our indemnity shield by firing the one person holding your infrastructure together? Because that clause? Section 6.3 referenced my continuity models, my LLC, my license. And now, since I was gone, they were operating in violation. That's when the CFO started showing up to meetings she usually skipped. She sat through stand-ups now, eyes cold, lips tight. She'd stopped pretending to scroll through her phone. Ethan, however, was still in performance mode, leaning against tables, saying things like, "Transition turbulence is natural." He used turbulence twice in one sentence. You could smell his fear. Meanwhile, the systems I'd built began to unravel, slowly, beautifully. Alerts went to dead inboxes. Risk flags reset to default. Client tiers lost priority weighting. Audit macros failed to trigger during internal reviews. They tried to patch things manually, but the architecture wasn't mechanical. It was behavioral, half logic, half intuition. You can't rebuild instinct with templates. By week 3, the panic finally broke the surface. Ethan called an emergency huddle. "We're initiating a redundancy protocol," he announced confidently. "We'll map Caroline's framework and replicate it internally." The IT director blinked at him. "You can't map what you don't have access to," he said. Ethan frowned. "We own it." The IT director leaned back, arms crossed. "Not according to her contract." Silence, real silence. The kind that thickens the air. 3 weeks. That's all it took for 7 years of work to start bleeding through their fingers. They hadn't realized yet, but they were standing on a hollow floor, and I'd built the drop myself. Then came the CFO's explosion. It happened outside the glass-walled conference room while half the office pretended not to eavesdrop. "I just got off a call with Tanner and Bell," she snapped, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "They've paused their Q1 renewal pending leadership clarification." "Want to tell me what that means, Ethan?" he stammered. "It's a negotiation tactic. They're playing hardball for better terms." "Hardball?" she repeated, stepping closer. They specifically cited continuity failure tied to infrastructure licensing. "You think that's a bluff?" He floundered. Caroline was just admin. She handled process stuff, checklists. That's when the CRO, who'd been quiet by the door, finally spoke. "Those legacy accounts were coded risk tier exempt. You don't checklist something like that. That was a full predictive model, hers." Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. He looked like someone trying to swallow panic in front of a crowd. The CFO folded her arms. We guaranteed 96% renewal on legacy clients. I signed that guarantee based on your projections. Either Caroline was more than admin, or you cooked those forecasts. That word, cooked, landed like a gunshot. In finance, that's not slang. It's accusation. And it's fatal. Legal had already started circling. Compliance sent an email that morning. Please confirm current licensing rights for all continuity systems involving third-party architecture. Nobody replied. Nobody could. By Monday morning of week 4, legal was officially on fire. You could hear it in the way paralegals clacked their keyboards like gunfire, the way people whispered in hallways and lowered their screens when Ethan walked by. The rumor mill churned faster than the server logs. Something about unauthorized IP usage. Something about contractual breach. The kind of whispers that make executives sweat. At 9:43 a.m., a compliance associate sent an internal email marked urgent. Can someone verify when Caroline's systems were migrated to central infrastructure? No one replied. 2 hours later, another email landed. Shorter, sharper, scarier. Please confirm current licensing rights for all client continuity protocols, specifically third-party architecture. That's lawyer code for, we might be committing fraud right now. Ethan called an emergency meeting with legal. It did not go the way he expected. The general counsel, an exhausted woman named Laura Kim, sharp as broken glass, walked in holding a printed copy of my contract, still warm from the copier. She sat down, crossed her legs, and read aloud. Clause 7.4d. Upon termination not for cause, all operational license rights revert to the consultants LLC. The room went still. A junior associate frowned. Wait, was she classified as a vendor? No, Laura said. Contractor. But she rolled into LLC status in 2020. That's when the IP clause went active. It wasn't reviewed during the renewal cycle. So, what does that mean? Ethan asked, voice tight. It means, she said, looking up from the page, we've been operating without a license for 3 weeks. Ethan blinked like she'd just spoken in another language. We can fix that, right? Just issue a retroactive amendment? Laura didn't even glance at him. You can't retroactively own something you already forfeited. That's when the CRO spoke, voice steady, almost detached. We didn't just lose Caroline. We lost the entire infrastructure we sell to clients as a service. You could almost hear the oxygen leave the room, because that was the truth. Meridian's whole value pitch, continuity without interruption, compliance without panic, was built on my architecture. The logic trees, the escalation flows, the retention modeling, all licensed to my LLC. They hadn't just fired me. They'd fired the framework that made them profitable. By Tuesday, chaos had gone visible. The CFO froze 2 funding initiatives. The CRO canceled 3 client demos. The director of client success muttered, Maybe we should reach out to her, in a voice halfway between desperation and prayer. Ethan scoffed. She'll want too much. Laura didn't even look up from her folder. You already gave her too much, she said. You just didn't read it. That's when she found it. The second trigger. A single sentence, printed in small font, that drained the color from her face. She read it twice, lips moving, before closing the folder slowly. Then she stood, heels clicking against the tile, and said, I need to speak to the CEO. And just like that, the disaster climbed the ladder. At 8:03 a.m. Wednesday, my phone buzzed. I let it go to voicemail the first time. When it rang again, I picked up. Caroline? Hi, it's Michael Keene, CEO of Meridian. How are you? His voice was smooth, too smooth, the tone of a man trying to charm his way out of a crater. I'm fine, I said. Good, he stammered. Listen, we've been reviewing some things, and it seems you've had quite a significant operational footprint here. We may have underestimated your impact. Operational footprint, I repeated. That what we're calling it? He chuckled awkwardly. We're interested in bringing you back, actually. Not just as a consultant. This would be a strategic advisory role. Competitive retainer. Full autonomy. Whatever you need to feel, respected. I almost smiled. Have you read the clause? Pause. Then, we're having legal review it. There's some ambiguity. There it was. The bluff. You don't have to bluff, Michael, I said softly. I'm happy to talk. You, me, and legal. You bring your checkbook. I'll bring my terms. Silence stretched so long I could almost hear the boardroom AC hum. Finally, his voice dropped. What are you looking for? Not angry. Frightened. I'm looking, I said evenly, for correction. The meeting was set for Friday morning, 9:00 a.m. sharp. Nothing good ever starts before coffee, and this was no exception. The boardroom felt colder than I remembered, though maybe it wasn't the air conditioning. Maybe it was the anxiety bleeding through the glass. Meridian's logo glowed faintly on the wall, like it was trying to pretend things were normal. They weren't. I walked in right on time, not a minute early, not a minute late. Navy blazer, hair pinned up, leather portfolio tucked under my arm like a scalpel. I didn't come for conversation. I came for surgery. Michael Keene sat at the head of the table. To his left, Ethan, pale and sweating through a shirt that probably cost more than my old annual bonus. To his right, a 4-person lineup from legal, led by Laura Kim. They were already shuffling papers, their movements clipped, nervous. The CFO sat 2 seats down, jaw tight. The CRO's expression was unreadable, which was a bad sign for Ethan. I didn't wait for permission. I stepped forward, opened my portfolio, and slid a single document across the polished walnut table. Original contract, I said. Executed March 2020, Section 7.4D is highlighted. One of the lawyers reached for it like it might burn. He scanned the page, and as he read, the blood drained from his face. He handed it to Laura. She read it once, then again, lips moving slightly as if she couldn't believe the words were real. Ethan leaned forward, trying to fill the silence. This isn't enforceable, right? I mean, it's just leftover language. Nobody actually... Laura cut him off, voice low. It's enforceable. Michael straightened his tie, trying for calm. Walk us through it, Caroline. Of course. He didn't ask because he respected me. He asked because no one else in the room had the courage to explain how badly they'd cornered themselves. In 2020, I began evenly. My contractor role was restructured under Grayson Systems LLC. The IP rider was included in the updated consulting agreement. Clause 7.4D states that if the contract is terminated not for cause, all rights to use any infrastructure, digital, procedural, or operational, revert to the license holder. That would be me. Ethan laughed, brittle. So what? You're saying you own our workflows? I'm saying, I replied, every escalation flow, every client risk model, every continuity tag, and every audit macro currently in use belongs to my LLC. Which means, since my termination, you've been operating illegally. The CFO's head snapped up. Laura nodded grimly. She's right. The clause is airtight, and she filed an end-of-engagement notice, time-stamped. That activated the trigger automatically. Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came. Michael rubbed a hand over his face. How much exposure are we talking? Laura didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence told him everything. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for clarity. I opened my portfolio again and slid a second sheet across the table. A single page, double-spaced, crisp black ink. My terms, I said simply. We renegotiate under Clause 7.4D right now. or the systems stay dark, and I begin notifying clients that I can no longer guarantee the integrity of their frameworks. Michael didn't reach for the paper. He just stared at it like it might detonate. The CFO, however, leaned forward and began to read. Her eyebrows rose, just slightly. "Retroactive pay," she murmured. "Starting the day I was terminated," I said. "At the 2020 consulting rate, backdated through today." Michael's eyes flicked down the page. "3 times the monthly retainer? Going forward?" "Yes," I said. "And I'll remain independent. External partner status. Fireproof." Ethan let out a shaky half laugh. "You can't be serious. This is extortion." "No," I said, calm as glass. "This is ownership." He opened his mouth again, but Laura's voice cut through like a knife. "She's right. Pay her." Michael blinked. "What?" "Pay her whatever she wants," Laura said firmly. "Every hour we stall, our liability multiplies." Michael exhaled. Slow. Defeated. That wasn't a business decision. It was surrender. Michael didn't argue. He just sat there, staring at the contract like it was a bomb with no timer, just an inevitable detonation. His face had that pale, stretched look you see on people who finally realized gravity applies to them too. Around the table, the lawyers stayed silent. The CFO's expression softened slightly. Not sympathy, respect. She'd seen a clean kill before. Ethan tried to recover, his voice rising, desperate to regain control of something, anything. This can't stand. We can challenge it. She's blackmailing the company. We can—" Laura turned toward him slowly, her expression something between pity and exhaustion. "Ethan, you signed the 2020 renewal addendum as acting director. You initialed every page, including the IP writer. This clause is your signature, literally." He blinked rapidly, color draining from his face. I thought it was boilerplate." Her tone was surgical. "You thought wrong." The room stayed still for a long time, the kind of stillness that follows impact. Then Michael finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "So, what does this mean for us?" I folded my hands on the table. "No need for drama. It means every client continuity system tied to my architecture, risk scoring, escalation routing, compliance triggers, is now under illegal use, which means your indemnity shields are compromised. If one client files a breach, your liability coverage collapses, and so does your credibility." The CFO whispered. "Jesus." Laura looked at Michael. "We haven't reported the risk exposure to the insurer yet." He turned toward her sharply. "You haven't?" She shook her head. "Because the moment we do, they'll freeze coverage. You know what happens next?" The CRO leaned back in her chair. "We've already lost 3 legacy clients this quarter. 2 more are ghosting renewal calls. If this goes public—" "It won't," Michael said quickly, his voice cracking just a little. Then he looked at me. "It won't, right, Caroline?" I tilted my head. "Depends on what you do next." He swallowed hard. "What's it going to take to make this go away?" I pushed the paper back toward him gently. "It's all there." He skimmed the list again, mouth moving silently. Then he reached the final bullet point and stopped. "Ethan is removed from all client-facing oversight," he read. "Immediately." "That's correct," I said. "He can keep a title if it helps you sleep, but he doesn't go near my systems, not as a user, not as a spectator, not even as a whisper." The air thickened again. Everyone watched Ethan. He sat frozen, trying to smirk but failing miserably. "You're joking," he said finally, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "This isn't a joke," I said. "This is a firewall." The CFO looked down to hide her smile. The CRO didn't bother. Laura just nodded once, slow and deliberate. Michael rubbed his temples, muttering something that sounded like a prayer. Then, louder. Done! It wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was an obituary. Ethan turned to him, incredulous. You can't just... Michael snapped. You did this, Ethan. You wanted leaner optics? Congratulations. You're invisible. For a moment, the room went silent except for the faint hum of the AC and the soft scratching of pens as the lawyers began writing. It was the sound of power shifting hands. I stood, closing my portfolio. You'll receive the updated licensing documents by end of day. My new retainer starts Monday. Michael nodded, staring down at the table, beaten but relieved. The CFO whispered, You saved the company, you know. I smiled faintly. No, I corrected it. Then I turned to Ethan, who still sat stiff and small in his expensive chair. You called me replaceable, I said quietly. But you weren't. His eyes flickered, but he didn't speak. I walked out without looking back. No applause, no triumph. Just the soft echo of my heels against polished tile and the whisper of the door closing behind me. Sometimes silence isn't absence. It's punctuation. The Monday after the signing felt different. The building still smelled like burnt coffee and fluorescent fatigue, but the air had shifted. Whispers followed me through the lobby, not the usual corporate gossip, but the kind that sounded like relief wrapped in disbelief. Meridian was still standing. Barely. But standing because I let it. The new contract was already in motion. My consulting LLC was listed as exclusive infrastructure partner, fireproofed by language even the most creative lawyer couldn't twist. 3 times the monthly retainer, autonomy on every operational decision, and a clause that made my termination practically impossible. Independence disguised as collaboration. That's how you survive corporate storms. You let them think they hired you back when really, they just licensed your silence. Michael tried small talk during our re-onboarding call. It's good to have you back, he said, smiling through the video screen like the last month hadn't happened. I just nodded. It's good for Meridian. Behind him, I could see Laura from legal watching quietly. She knew the truth. So did the CFO. The company hadn't hired me. They'd capitulated. That week, I did what I always did. Made systems work again. Tanner and Bell's renewal resumed within 72 hours. Account B's compliance complaint was withdrawn after I personally reconfigured their audit portal. Account C? They extended their contract another 2 years once I reinstated their indemnity flow. The machine started humming again, silent and smooth, as if it had never cracked. But this time, everyone knew whose hands were on the controls. Ethan lasted 4 more days. His resignation email went out Friday morning, filled with the usual corporate poetry, seeking new opportunities, grateful for my time here, proud of what we accomplished. It landed in inboxes like a whimper. No one replied. Not even HR. By noon, his badge was deactivated. I didn't smile when I read it. I didn't need to. Friday evening, I stayed late. Old habits die hard. The office was quiet except for the hum of the HVAC and the low flicker of monitor screensavers. I walked past the empty glass conference room where it had all happened. The same walnut table, the same cold air. Only the power was different now. I stopped by the window, looking out over downtown Seattle. Rain was streaking the glass in thin silver lines. Below, the city kept moving, people rushing, lights flickering, deadlines spinning. It all looked so small from up here. Funny thing about invisibility, it's only painful when you don't control it. Once you do, it's armor. I thought about all the times I'd stayed late fixing someone else's mess, all the quiet saves that never made it into presentations. I'd spent years making other people look competent, and when they called me replaceable, I'd believe them for half a second, until I remembered who built the foundation they were standing on. Control isn't loud. It's quiet, methodical, invisible. Like me. A soft ping came from my phone. A message from the CFO. Tanner and Bell just renewed early. Congrats, partner. Partner. That word landed differently. I shut down my laptop, slid my badge into my bag, and turned off the light. The office looked almost peaceful in the dark. Behind me, the glass walls reflected a woman in a navy blazer, calm, still, untouchable. The ghost they'd once ignored had become the architect they now depended on. As I stepped into the elevator, I thought back to the moment Ethan had smirked and said, "You're replaceable." He wasn't wrong. Not entirely. Replaceable people vanish quietly. Unreplaceable ones vanish deliberately. When the doors slid shut, I caught my reflection one last time. I wasn't smiling, but there was something close, a quiet satisfaction. Still waters run deep, they say. They never mentioned the undertow, and that undertow just bought me everything they thought they owned.